Captain stared at the alien ship on his screen. It was massive, at least 3 times the size of his colony vessel. The Eternal Dawn had been traveling through deep space for 6 months when the sensors picked up the unknown craft. Now, here they were, face to face with the first alien civilization humanity had ever encountered. "They're hailing us," said from the communication station. His hands shook slightly as he worked the controls, audio and visual. "Put them through," ordered. He straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. This was it, first contact. The screen flickered and an alien appeared. The creature had smooth, pale blue skin and 4 delicate arms. Its head was elongated, with large, dark eyes that seemed to take up half its face. When it spoke, the translation software kicked in. "Greetings, unknown travelers. I am High Scholar Al of the Empire. We mean you no harm. We wish only to understand who you are." Felt his shoulders relax slightly. "I am captain of the human vessel Eternal Dawn. We also come in peace. We are from a planet called Earth." Al's head tilted to one side, a gesture that the computer suggested meant curiosity. "Earth. We have no record of this world. You are far from any charted civilization. How did your species come to travel the stars?" "We built ships and left our home to find new worlds," explained. "Our planet was getting crowded and we wanted to explore." "You left your—" Al's voice rose in pitch. The translation marked it as surprise. "Was there a catastrophe, a plague, a dying sun?" Shook his head. "No, nothing like that. We just wanted to see what was out here." The alien was quiet for a long moment. "Fascinating. Most species only leave their worlds when forced by disaster. They themselves have evacuated 17 worlds in our history due to various calamities." 17, the chief engineer spoke up from her station. "That seems like a lot." "It is the way of survival," Al said simply. "When conditions become difficult, one must move to better circumstances. It is logical. But tell me, humans, what is your history? How long has your species existed?" Thought for a moment. "Our species, Homo, has been around for about 300,000 years. Our civilization, the version with cities and writing, about 12,000 years." Al's 4 arms moved in what seemed like agitation. 300,000 years. On one world, surely there were extinction events, natural disasters. "Oh, plenty," said with a casual shrug. "Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, floods. A few times we came close to dying out completely. There was one ice age that reduced our population to maybe 10,000 individuals." The alien's arms went completely still. "And yet you survived. How?" "We just kept going," said. "We adapted, moved to new areas, invented new tools, worked together." "You did not leave the planet." "We couldn't. We didn't have the technology yet." "So you endured." Al's voice was barely above a whisper. "You stayed and suffered through conditions that would have killed you rather than flee." "Well, yes," said, confused by the alien's reaction. "Where else would we go?" Before Al could respond, alarms blared on the ship. The screen split, showing the alien and a view of their vessel. Sparks flew from one of the external modules. "Our power distributor has failed," Al cried out. "We must evacuate the section immediately." Was already scanning the alien ship. "Captain, I can see the problem. It's a simple overload in their transfer coupling. If they evacuate, the whole power grid will cascade. They'll lose life support." "Can we help?" asked. "I think so, but I'd need to go over there." Made the decision in seconds. "Al, we have an engineer who can fix your problem. Will you allow us to board?" The alien looked desperate. "Yes, please, quickly." 20 minutes later, floated through the ship's corridors in her spacesuit, accompanied by 2 crew members. The aliens moved carefully, almost fearfully, as if expecting the ship to explode at any moment. "Here," one of them said, pointing to a panel. "The coupling is behind this wall." Opened the panel and examined the problem. Just as she thought, the coupling had overheated and fused. It was a simple fix, really. She pulled out a tool and hit the coupling sharply 3 times. It sparked once, then the lights turned from red to green. "There," she said, "should be fine now." The crew members stared at her. What did you do?" one asked. "Percussive maintenance," said cheerfully. "Sometimes you just need to knock things back into place. The coupling was stuck, now it's not. You struck it with force and it obeyed." Laughed. "I wouldn't say it obeyed. It just needed a little encouragement." "But the pain," the alien said. "The vibration through your arm, the risk of damage to yourself. How did you endure it?" Looked at her hand, confused. "Pain. It didn't hurt, it's just a little tap." The two looked at each other, in what was starting to recognize as amazement. Back on the Eternal Dawn, was discussing next steps with Al when in returned. "Your engineer has performed a miracle," Al said. "She used her own body as a tool, enduring discomfort to repair our ship. Such dedication, such sacrifice." "Sacrifice?" Blinked. "I just hit it a few times." "We have been speaking," Al continued, "and my crew and I have a request. We wish to accompany you to your colony. We wish to observe your species, to learn from you." Glanced at his crew. "Why?" "Because in all our travels across 4,000 worlds, we have never encountered a species like yours. You persist where others flee. You endure where others would perish. You strike metal with your bare hands and call it simple. We must understand this. We must learn what makes you so unyielding." Leaned toward and whispered, "Sir, I think they're really impressed by us." "Maybe too impressed," whispered back. But looking at Al's eager expression, he made his decision. "Very well. You're welcome to come with us, but I warn you, we're just ordinary people. There's nothing special about us." Al's eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. "Captain, I believe you are wrong. I believe you are the most special species we have ever encountered, and I believe the galaxy will come to see you as we do." Felt a small chill run down his spine, though he couldn't say why. "Well, let's hope we don't disappoint you." As the two ships began their journey together toward the human colony of Nu, Al began writing in a personal log. The entry was titled, "First Observations of the Unyielding Ones." None of the humans knew it yet, but those observations would change everything. Minu rubbed his tired eyes and stared at the reports on his desk. As the colony administrator of Nu, he dealt with a lot of strange problems. But this was new. According to the security logs, the visitors had been following the colonists around, taking notes on everything they did. "Sir, they're doing it again," his assistant said, poking her head into his office. "Doing what again?" "Watching people drink coffee. There are 5 of them in the main cafeteria right now, just starring." Minu sighed. It had been 6 months since the Eternal Dawn had arrived with their alien guests. At first, everything had been fine. They were polite, curious, and kept to themselves. But lately, things had gotten weird. He walked down to the cafeteria and found exactly what his assistant had described. 5 stood in a semicircle around the coffee machine, watching a tired maintenance worker pour himself a cup. "Good morning," Minu said carefully. Al, who seemed to be the leader of the group, turned to him. "Administrator Minu, we are observing the ritual of the sacred beverage." "The what, you mean coffee?" "Yes, the dark liquid that humans consume to continue working despite exhaustion. We have been documenting its use." The maintenance worker, a man named, took a sip and noticed everyone staring at him. Is there a problem?" "How long have you been awake?" Al asked him. Checked his watch. "About 19 hours, double shift. We're short-staffed in maintenance." They made a collective sound that the translator interpreted as shock. 19 hours, and you continue to function." "Well, I'm tired," admitted, "but the work needs doing. I'll sleep when I'm done." "He'll sleep when he's done," Al repeated, and the other began writing frantically in their devices. "This phrase appears in our observations 47 times now. Humans consistently postpone rest to complete tasks. Minyu felt his confusion growing. That's just normal. Sometimes we have to work when we're tired. Normal, Al said softly. They call it normal. Before Minyu could ask what that meant, his communicator buzzed. It was the agricultural specialist. Minyu, we have a problem in the greenhouse. I need you here now. Minyu excused himself and hurried to the agricultural section. When he arrived, he found staring at rows of withering crops. Blight, she said flatly. Some kind of fungal infection. It's spreading fast. If we don't stop it, we'll lose the entire harvest. Can you stop it? Rolled up her sleeves. I don't know, but I'm going to try. That was 3 days ago. Now Minyu stood in the greenhouse again, watching examine plant samples under a microscope. She had barely left the lab since the crisis began. Her eyes were red, her hair was messy, and she had coffee stains on her lab coat. You need to sleep, Minyu said gently. Can't, I'm close to something. There's a pattern in how the blight spreads. If I can just isolate she swayed on her feet. Minyu caught her arm. You're going to collapse. Then I'll collapse after I solve this. She pulled away and went back to her work. Minyu noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Al and 2 others stood at the greenhouse entrance, watching. How long has she been working? Al asked. Minyu checked his records. 72 hours with maybe 6 hours of sleep total. Impossible, one of the other breathed. Our biologists cannot work more than 8 hours without severe pain and mental deterioration. She's very dedicated, Minyu said, though he was starting to worry about himself. Dedicated, Al repeated, writing in his device. Another human trait, they call it dedication. We would call it divine endurance. 4 hours later, shouted in triumph. I've got it, I know how to stop it. She had developed a treatment using a combination of local and earth-based compounds. It wasn't perfect, but it would save most of the crops. As she administered the treatment to the plants, her hands shook with exhaustion. They watched every movement. When finally finished and sat down heavily on a bench, Al approached her. You have saved your colony from starvation, the alien said. You sacrificed your health, your rest, your comfort. Why? Looked at him with bleary eyes. Because people need to eat. What else would I do? What else would she do? Al whispered, as if there were no other choice but to endure. Minyu began to realize something was happening, something he didn't quite understand. They weren't just observing anymore. They were interpreting. They were finding meaning in things that seemed ordinary to humans. His suspicions were confirmed the next week when he found a group in the education center, who worked maintenance and also taught children part-time, was giving a history lesson. And that's how the dinosaurs went extinct, was saying to the class of young colonists. A giant asteroid hit Earth and killed most of the life on the planet. A child raised her hand, but we survived. Our ancestors did. They were small mammals back then. They hid, they adapted, and eventually they evolved into humans. We have a question, Al said from the back of the room. Minyu hadn't even noticed the alien was there. Your world has experienced 5 mass extinction events. That's what the scientists say, yes, confirmed. And your species, or its ancestors, survived all of them. Well, we're here, aren't we? Said with a smile. Al stood abruptly. We must report this. The testimony of survival, it must be recorded. That evening, Minyu found something that made his blood run cold. In the plaza near the main cafeteria, they had built something. It was a small structure, carefully crafted from local materials. Inside it, sitting on a pedestal, was the coffee machine from the cafeteria. What is this? Minyu demanded. A female named who he'd learned was some kind of spiritual leader, turned to him. It is a shrine, a place to honor the sacred fuel of persistence. The coffee machine. You built a shrine to our coffee machine. Through this device flows the dark liquid, that allows humans to transcend their physical limitations. Is it not worthy of reverence? Minyu ran his hand through his hair. It's just coffee, it's not sacred, it's just coffee. You say this because you do not see your own miracle, I said softly. But we see it. We see how you endure, how you persist, how you refuse to yield to pain, exhaustion, or hardship. We have traveled to 4,000 worlds, Administrator Minyu, and we have never seen anything like humanity. But we're not special, Minyu protested. We're just doing what needs to be done. Exactly, I said, as if he'd just proven her point. You do what needs to be done, no matter the cost to yourselves. That is why we have decided. We are bringing more of our people here, thousands of them. They need to see. They need to witness. They need to learn from the unyielding ones. Minyu felt panic rising in his chest. Thousands. We can't support thousands of visitors. They will bring their own supplies. They ask only to observe, to learn, to be transformed by your example. As Minyu struggled to find words, his communicator buzzed. It was a message from Earth, from the United Nations. They'd been monitoring the situation and they had questions. A lot of questions. The message ended with a line that made Minyu's stomach sink. Reports indicate they are calling humans divine. Please explain. Minyu looked at the shrine, at the bowing before a coffee machine, at A's reverent expression. I think, he said slowly, we have a problem. Not a problem, I corrected gently. A blessing. The galaxy is ready to hear the truth about humanity. Soon, all will know what we know. Minyu sent a reply to Earth. It was short and desperate. Send help. They think we're gods. Stood before the United Nations Assembly and wished he was anywhere else. As the newly appointed ambassador for alien relations, he had expected his job to involve diplomacy and trade negotiations. Instead, he was trying to explain why 847 alien worlds now humanity as divine beings. Let me make sure I understand, the Secretary General said, her voice tight with stress. They have started a religion based on humans, and it's spreading. Yes, ma'am, confirmed. They call it the Church of Enduring Will. Their central belief is that humanity possesses a divine quality they call sacred persistence. And how many worlds are part of this church? As of this morning, 847 worlds. That's approximately 60% of their entire empire. The number grows daily. A delegate from Brazil stood. What exactly are they worshiping? What do they think we are? Pulled up a holographic display. According to their texts, they believe humans are blessed by the universe with the ability to endure suffering. They've documented various human activities and declared them sacred rituals. These include drinking coffee, working overtime, exercise, saying phrases like, "I'll sleep when I'm dead," and something they call the sacred art of percussive maintenance. Percussive maintenance, the Secretary General asked. Hitting things until they work. A long silence filled the chamber. This is insane, someone muttered. Who had been studying stepped forward. If I may, I think I can explain why this happened. The Secretary General nodded. Please do. Brought up biological scans. They have pain receptors approximately 10 times more sensitive than humans. What we would call a minor scratch they experience as severe agony. Their entire evolution favored avoiding discomfort. When their world gets too hot, too cold, or too dangerous, they simply leave. They've never had to endure. So when they saw us just dealing with problems, said, they couldn't comprehend it, confirmed. Imagine seeing someone walk through fire and act like it's nothing. That's how they see us doing basic tasks while tired, hungry, or in minor pain. To them, we're performing miracles constantly. The military advisor spoke up from her seat. This is more than a curiosity. We have intelligence that 3 alien empires are watching this situation closely. They're not happy. Why not? The Secretary General asked. Because they see it as a threat. A religion that spreads this fast, based on emulating human behavior, could destabilize the entire galactic political structure. Some species are calling it mimetic warfare. Felt his stomach drop. Mimetic warfare. Ideas as weapons. They think we're doing this deliberately to gain influence. But we're not doing anything, protested. Doesn't matter what we're doing. Matters what they think we're doing. The Secretary General stood. Ambassador, I'm sending you to the... You need to convince them that we're not divine. Make them understand we're just ordinary people. 3 weeks later stood in the Grand Temple of Enduring Will on the... The building was massive, with statues of humans performing everyday tasks. One showed working in her lab. Another depicted hitting the coupling with her tool. There was even one of a human drinking coffee, titled The Sustenance of the Faithful. Grand Oracle the leader of the church, greeted him warmly. Ambassador, it is an honor to meet one of the unyielding ones in person. Grand Oracle, I need to speak with you about this church. We're very flattered, but we're not divine. We're just people. Eyes shone. Your humility only proves your divine nature. A true God would not claim to be God. This is written in the third testament of coffee. The third, there are testaments. 7 so far. We are working on the 8th, based on recent observations of a human named. He runs 5 kilometers every morning, despite the pain in his muscles. Then he lifts heavy objects repeatedly, for no reason other than to make himself stronger. Recognize the description. That's just exercise, it's normal. You say normal again, said, as if this was profound. You do not see the extraordinary in yourselves. This is the greatest teaching of all. Over the next week, tried everything. He showed them human medical reports, proving they felt pain. He demonstrated that coffee was just a stimulant, not a magical potion. He even hurt himself deliberately to prove he wasn't invincible. They interpreted all of it as religious lessons. When he showed them pain receptors, they said, he reveals the price of divinity. When he explained coffee, they said, he shares the secrets of the sacred fuel. When he hurt himself, they were horrified but impressed. He suffers for our enlightenment. Called in desperation, nothing works, everything I do makes it worse. I'm seeing the same thing across the galaxy, said over the video call. The more humans try to explain themselves, the more devoted the followers become. Humans in the diplomatic corps are being declared prophets. One ambassador did a workout routine in front of cameras to prove it wasn't special. They called it ritual self-mortification for spiritual growth. So what do we do? I don't know, but intelligence was right. 3 species have formed a coalition. They're calling themselves the Alliance for Rational Thought. They claim we're a mimetic threat and are preparing to take action. What kind of action? They're demanding we disband the church, publicly reject the faith, and accept monitoring of all human-alien interactions. Felt anger rise in his chest. They can't demand that. We didn't start this religion. We can't just end it. They don't care. They see a human-centered religion spreading across thousands of worlds, and they're afraid. Back on Earth, presented satellite intelligence to the military command. 3 fleets are massing near human colony space. The Empire, the Talon Confederacy, and the Collective. Combined, they have approximately 5,000 warships. What are they planning? A general asked. Their public statement says they're going to contain the mimetic threat. Our analysts believe they're going to attack human colonies to prove we're not divine. If humans can be defeated, the religion loses its foundation. The general looked at the display showing human defensive forces. We have maybe 300 ships ready for deployment. We're outnumbered 15 to 1. Yes, sir. And they've declared that if anyone attacks humans, it will be considered an attack on their holiest sites. They're preparing their temple ships. These are massive vessels they use for religious ceremonies, but they have weapons. A lot of weapons. The general sat back. So we're looking at a religious war because they think we're special. Yes, sir. Received the news while still on the. He immediately requested an audience with Grand Oracle You have to stop this, said. If you fight for us, people will die. Millions of people, millions of. We will not allow the divine ones to be harmed, said calmly. We're not divine. How many times do I have to say it? As many times as you wish, we will still know the truth. Felt helpless. Please, I'm begging you, don't go to war over this. Studied him for a long moment. You would beg. You would humble yourself to save lives, even the lives of those who threaten you. Yes, of course. Do you not see? This is exactly why you are worthy of reverence. A human will endure humiliation, pain, and defeat to protect others. This is the essence of your divinity. You persist not for yourselves, but for all beings. Realized with growing horror that even his attempts to prevent the war were being turned into religious doctrine. That night he sent a message to Earth. The won't stand down. The coalition won't back off. We're heading for war and I don't know how to stop it. The response came from, then we prepare. If we're going to be gods in their eyes, we might as well act like it. We refuse to back down. Looked out at the massive temples built in humanity's name, at the millions of believers who saw humans as sacred. What have we done? He whispered to himself. But he knew the answer. They hadn't done anything. They'd just been themselves. And somehow that was enough to change the galaxy forever. The first attack came at dawn on the colony world of New Haven. Was running his morning route when the sky lit up with weapons fire. He dove behind a building as plasma bolts struck the street where he'd been seconds before. All civilians to shelters, the emergency broadcast blared. We are under attack. Ran toward his fighter squadron's base instead. He was a pilot and his people needed him. Above, he could see the enemy ships, dark shapes against the morning sky. There were so many of them. By the time he reached his fighter, alarms were screaming across the base. His squadron leader, a woman named, was already in her cockpit. How many? Shouted over the noise. 200 enemy ships, she replied. We have 12 fighters operational. 12 against 200, felt his heart hammering. That's insane. Then we better get creative, you with me? Climbed into his fighter. His hands shook as he ran through the startup sequence. The odds were impossible. Any reasonable person would surrender. But as he launched into the sky, he thought about the people in the shelters below. The families, the children. Gold Squadron, this is Gold Leader's voice came over the comm. I won't lie to you. We're outnumbered. But we're also defending our home. So let's show them what humans do when the odds are against us. We keep fighting, said. Damn right we do. The battle was chaos. Fighter screamed through the air, dodging plasma bolts and missile locks. He managed to down 2 enemy fighters, but for every one he destroyed, 5 more took its place. His shields were failing. His weapons were overheating. He was exhausted. But he didn't stop. Gold 3 is hit, someone screamed over the comm. Gold 7 down. Gold 2 ejecting. One by one, his squadron fell. Soon it was just 2 fighters against more than 100 enemy ships. Eject, ordered. That's an order, get out of there. Not yet, replied. There was a weapons depot below. If the enemy destroyed it, half the colony would go with it. He pushed his damaged fighter into a dive, heading straight for a cluster of enemy bombers. What are you doing? Buying time. He fired everything he had left. Missiles, guns, even his emergency flares. 3 enemy bombers exploded. The others broke formation, giving the ground defenses time to shoot them down. Then his fighter gave out. Systems failed across the board. He was falling. Eject, screamed. Pulled the ejection handle. The canopy blew off, and his seat rocketed free just as his fighter crashed into an empty field. He hit the ground hard, his parachute tangling in the trees. Above, the battle continued, but reinforcements were arriving now. Human ships from Earth and the other colonies, and behind them, massive vessels he'd never seen before. The temple ships had arrived. Thousands of light years away, Sora was dealing with her own crisis. The border colony of Far Point was under siege. Enemy bombardment had knocked out the power grid, including the hospital's backup generators. Sora was a doctor, and she had 40 patients who would die without immediate surgery. The problem was that surgery required light, sterilization equipment, and monitoring systems, all of which needed power. "We have to evacuate them," her assistant said. Sora looked at the patients. Most were too injured to move. "They won't survive transport. We operate here or we lose them." "How, we don't have power?" Sora made a decision. "Then we work without it. Get me every battery pack you can find. Tablets, communicators, emergency lights, everything. Strip the crashed ship in the courtyard if you have to." For the next 6 hours, Sora performed surgery by the light of tablet screens and emergency flashlights. She sterilized tools with alcohol and flame. She monitored heart rates by feeling pulses with her fingers. When the building shook from nearby explosions, she kept her hands steady. 1 patient, then 2, then 5, then 10. Her back screamed with pain from bending over the operating table. Her eyes burned from the strain of working in dim light. Her hands cramped from holding tools at awkward angles. She kept going. Al, who had been documenting human behavior for over a year now, watched from the doorway. He had insisted on staying when the evacuation was ordered. Now he recorded everything. "Why do you continue?" he asked softly when Sora paused between patients. "You are in pain, you could stop." Sora wiped sweat from her forehead. "These people need me. What else would I do?" "What else would she do?" Al whispered, writing frantically. "The miracle of unwavering hands. Performed surgery without tools, without light, without rest. 40 souls saved through will alone." "I had tools," Sora said tiredly, "just not the right ones." "To you perhaps, to us, you performed the impossible." By the time the siege ended, Sora had saved 38 of the 40 patients. She collapsed in exhaustion afterward, sleeping for 16 hours straight. When she woke, she found that images of her surgery had spread across the networks. They were calling it a sacred event. Admiral, now in command of Earth's defense fleet, stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable and watched the tactical display. The enemy coalition had committed 5,000 ships to the war. Humanity could field about 300. They had committed over 10,000 temple ships. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the coalition commander, Warlord," his communications officer reported. "Put him through." An alien with red scales and sharp teeth appeared on the screen. "Human Admiral, your forces are pathetic. You cannot win this war. Surrender now and we will spare your civilians." Considered his response carefully. "Warlord, I need you to understand something about humans. We don't know how to surrender. We're too stupid to quit when we should." His eyes narrowed. "Stupid." "That's right. You see, any logical species would look at the odds and give up. But we're not logical. We're stubborn. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and extinction events. We kept going when any sane species would have died. So no, we're not going to surrender. We're going to fight you with everything we have." "Then you will die." "Probably," agreed, "but we'll make you work for it." The transmission cut off. His executive officer looked at him in shock. "Sir, that was." "The truth," said. "Let them know what they're up against." The battles that followed were brutal. The coalition had superior numbers and technology, but they had never fought an enemy like humanity. When human ships were damaged, they kept fighting. When ammunition ran low, they rammed enemy vessels. When retreat was the logical option, they held the line. The coalition forces were confused. Their doctrine was based on logical warfare, retreat when necessary, preserve forces, accept defeat when the odds were impossible. Humans didn't do any of that. In one battle, a human frigate with a failing reactor deliberately crashed into an enemy battleship, destroying both vessels. The human crew had 30 seconds to evacuate. They used it to aim the ship. Watch the recording in disbelief. They killed themselves. Why? Because there were civilians on the planet below, his intelligence officer explained. The battleship was heading to bombard them. But they died. They saved people who weren't even related to them, people they'd never met. That's what humans do, apparently. Though watching all of this became more devoted than ever. Every battle where humans refused to retreat became a religious text. Every sacrifice was documented and taught. Squadron's last stand was called the Testimony of Gold Squadron. Sara's surgery was now the miracle of Far Point. Every human who fought, who endured, who refused to give up, became part of the growing mythology. And slowly, impossibly, the war began to turn. Not because humanity was winning, but because the coalition couldn't understand their enemy. How do you defeat someone who refuses to accept defeat? Sent another message too. What will it take for you to surrender? His response was simple. You could kill every human in the galaxy, and the last one standing would still tell you no. Realize then that he was fighting something he'd never encountered before. An enemy that didn't care about odds, didn't care about logic, didn't care about survival. They only cared about not giving up. And that, he was starting to understand, made them terrifying. 5 years after first contact, sat in a conference room on a neutral space station and felt every one of his 63 years. The war had ended 6 months ago, not with a grand battle, but with exhaustion. The coalition had simply given up trying to defeat an enemy that wouldn't stay defeated. Now, representatives from 40,000 worlds had gathered for the Galactic Summit. The topic, what to do about humanity and the religion that had formed around them, was there as Earth's representative. Beside him sat Minu, and all of them looked tired. All of them wished they were somewhere else. Across the table sat Al, now called Supreme Prophet Al, leader of the Church of Enduring Will. The church had grown to 40,000 member worlds, nearly a third of known space. Let's start with the basic question, the summit mediator said. She was a neutral species called the Chosen because they had no stake in the matter. Humans, do you claim to be divine? No, said firmly. We've never claimed that, we're just people. The prophet speaks with characteristic humility, Al said reverently, and his followers in the gallery murmured in approval. Resisted the urge to put his head in his hands. That's not humility, it's a fact. Leaned forward. Look, we've tried to explain this. Our biology is different from yours. What seems incredible to you is normal for us. We're not special. I have a presentation, added, pulling up holographic charts. These show human pain thresholds, endurance capacity, and psychological resilience compared to the galactic average. Yes, we're on the higher end, but it's not magic, it's evolution. Our planet was harsh. Our species adapted. That's all. She speaks the Book of Origins, and the audience whispered loudly, the creation story. It's not a creation story, protested. It's biology. The mediator held up a hand. I understand the human's position, but the reality is that a religion exists. 40,000 worlds follow it. You can't simply wish it away. Minu spoke up. We're not trying to wish it away. We're trying to make people understand the truth. We're not gods. We're not prophets. We're just trying to live our lives. And in living your lives, you inspire billions, Al said. Is that not a form of divinity? No, several humans said at once. The summit continued for days. Different proposals were made. Ban the religion, restrict human-alien contact, force humans to publicly deny their divinity, Each one was rejected for various reasons. Then the teacher spoke. He'd been quiet most of the summit, just listening. "Can I ask the something?" he said. "Of course," Al replied. "Why do you really follow this religion? And I mean really, not the official doctrine. What does it give you?" Al was quiet for a long moment. "It gives us hope." Hope. Before we met humans, the Empire was stagnant. We avoided all risk. At the first sign of danger or difficulty, we fled. We accomplished nothing new for 10,000 years because we were too afraid to try. He stood and addressed the entire summit. Then we saw humans. We saw them face impossible odds and try anyway. We saw them work through pain and exhaustion. We saw them refuse to give up even when giving up was the logical choice. And we thought, perhaps we could do that too. Another stood. "I am a scientist. Before the church, I abandoned experiments the moment they became difficult. Now I persist. I have made discoveries I never would have made before." Another rose. "I am an engineer. I used to design only simple, safe structures. Now I attempt complex projects. Some fail, but some succeed and they are beautiful." More stood, sharing similar stories. The religion, they said, had changed them, made them braver, made them try harder, made them persist. "But you don't need a religion for that," said. "You can just do those things." "Could we?" Al asked. "Before you, we didn't even know it was possible. You showed us a different way of existing. Perhaps you are not gods, but you are certainly teachers." Felt something shift in his understanding. This wasn't about humans being. It was about the trying to be better. "What if," said slowly, "we accepted that the religion exists but changed what it teaches?" Everyone looked at him. "What do you mean?" the mediator asked. "Right now, the church is about worshiping humans. What if we changed it to be about the principles instead? Persistence, endurance, trying even when it's hard. Not because humans are divine, but because these are good values." Al tilted his head. "A reformation. You would guide us toward a new understanding." "Not guide," said, catching on. "We're not prophets, but we could share our perspective. Explain that these qualities aren't unique to humans. Any species can develop them." "We could teach," added. "Not as religious leaders, but as people who happen to have experience with persistence." Minyu nodded. "And in exchange, the church agrees to stop building shrines to coffee machines and making everything we do sacred." "Some things must remain sacred," Al said, but he was smiling. "But perhaps we have been too literal in our interpretation. Perhaps the coffee is not sacred, but the will to continue that the coffee represents." Pulled up new charts. "I've been documenting this. Since the church began, average productivity in space has increased by 300%. Innovation is up. Quality of life measurements are improving. People are attempting things they never would have tried before. Because they're emulating humans," a coalition representative said. "That's exactly what we were afraid of, human cultural dominance." Or countered, "They're growing, evolving, becoming better versions of themselves. Isn't that what culture is supposed to do? Inspire us to improve." The debate continued for hours. Finally, a compromise was reached. The Church of Enduring Will would continue, but it would be reformed. Humans would be acknowledged not as divine, but as examples. The focus would shift from worship to practice. Less prayer, more action. "And the shrines?" Minyu asked hopefully. "The coffee machine stays," Al said firmly. "It is tradition now." Minyu sighed but nodded. Some battles couldn't be won. As the summit concluded, found himself alone with Al in an observation room, looking out at the stars. "I'm sorry we couldn't be what you wanted us to be," said quietly. "You are exactly what we needed you to be," Al replied. "You showed us that we were capable of more than we believed. That is a greater gift than divinity. We didn't do it on purpose." "I know, that makes it even more remarkable. You didn't try to be inspiring, you simply were, you existed, you persisted. and in doing so, you change the galaxy. Thought about the war, the lives lost, the pain endured. Was it worth it? 12 species have adopted persistence training in their schools. 8 have reformed their evacuation protocols to try solving problems before fleeing. 23 have started programs encouraging their people to attempt difficult tasks. Yes, Captain, it was worth it. Months later, retired, he returned to the small colony that had started everything. He found the coffee machine still in its shrine, now carefully maintained by the colonists who'd grown fond of the visitors. A young child approached him one day as he was drinking coffee at a "Excuse me," the child said in careful English. "Are you Prophet?" "I'm just," he replied gently, "just a man. My teacher says you showed the galaxy how to be brave." "I showed the galaxy how to be stubborn. There's a difference." The child thought about this. What is the difference? Smiled. Brave people know when to stop. Stubborn people don't. We humans, we're usually just too stubborn to quit. Will you teach me to be stubborn? Sure. Lesson 1. When something is hard, you keep trying anyway, even when it hurts, even when you're tired, even when everyone says you should give up. Why? Because sometimes the only difference between failure and success is refusing to stop. The child pulled out a small device and started writing, realized with amusement that he was being documented. Some things never changed. That evening, he sat in his small apartment and recorded a message. It would become known as the Final Testament, though he didn't know that when he made it. To anyone listening, he said, "We're not gods, we're not special, we're just people who don't know when to quit. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, but it's our thing. And if it helps you, if it inspires you to try harder and reach further, then I guess being stubborn was good for something. Just remember, you don't need us to be persistent. You can do it yourself. You always could. We just showed you it was possible." He paused, then added, "And for the love of all that's holy, the coffee machine is just a machine. Please stop building shrines to it." The message spread across the galaxy. It was debated, analyzed, and yes, turned into scripture. But it also started conversations about inspiration and influence, about gods and teachers, about the difference between worship and admiration. The Church of Enduring will evolved. It became less about humans and more about the principles. Al guided the Reformation carefully, always checking with his human friends to make sure he understood their perspective. 50 years later, when died peacefully in his sleep, they honored him not with grand monuments, but by each trying to be a little more persistent in their own lives. It was, they decided, what he would have wanted. The coffee machine, however, remained in its shrine. Some traditions were too strong to break. And across the galaxy, beings of 40,000 worlds continued to learn the same lesson humanity had learned long ago. When everything seems impossible, when the odds are against you, when logic says to quit, sometimes the right choice is to keep going anyway. Not because it's divine, not because it's magical. Simply because it needs to be done, and someone has to do it. And that someone might as well be you.